Hello, welcome. Welcome to this very important webinar. Welcome to this very important webinar we are starting today. It's a series of events that we will do subsequently. The first in the sequence is an interaction with the industry and academia. And in that case, we have today the speakers from Google and ELRA and Government of India. And of course, JNU, we have our own Vice Chancellor, Professor M. Jagdish Kumar. Now, and I welcome all the participants who have registered in large numbers. We had a total of 900 unique registrations today. And I'm sure they'll be joining in large numbers subsequently. Now, so I welcome all the speakers, colleagues, and all the registered participants. In particular, I would like to welcome our speakers from Google, Dan Vash and Khalid Chukri from ELRA, France. I'm sure it would be difficult times for you. For Dan, it is very late in the night, and for Khalid, it would be early in the morning. I welcome Simi Chaudhary, Miss Simi Chaudhary, the group coordinator and head of the TDIL. I welcome Vijay Kumarji from TDIL, and I welcome our own Vice Chancellor, Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, for taking time off to attend this very important interaction that we are starting today. Now, the goal of this webinar, as you would have guessed by now, is to bring academia, industry, and government on a single platform to evolve a viable model for resource creation for language technology, maintenance, and distribution of the resources. So that has been a critical area where India has been lagging behind seriously. Actually, we have, as you know, 22 national official languages, and we do not have resources for many of them actually. And in the industry area, you know, Google has been a leader, followed by Microsoft, Amazon, Samsung, Apple, and there are a lot of MSMEs and startups are actually taking the banner and working hard on Indian languages, resource creation, and technology. And but we have two very important leading resource organizations called ELRA, European Language Resource Association, which works also on Indian languages, and we have LDC, Linguistic Data Consortium of University of Pennsylvania. I'll talk about them a little later, but these can, of course, work as possible models for us to, to handle Indian language resource creation. And then we have our own academic institutions. We have central universities, IITs, and I think more than 800 universities in India. The large manpower actually waiting there to be harnessed for creating resources and managing and maintaining them. And Government of India has been very liberal in actually funding and organizing events and giving projects in this area to make sure that the resource creation and technology development is in sync. So this is our first event. We call it Academia Industry Interaction for Indian Language Technology, acronymed Ai3LT. And today we have Google, ELRA, JNU, and Government of India. And all the subsequent instances will obviously bring in more players in this area. And the goal is to try to evolve, as I said, a model where the Government of India and the industry and academia can work in a single ecosystem. Now, to start the program, let me welcome our Vice Chancellor, Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, who will be our inaugural speaker. Professor Kumar, as you know, is a renowned academician and an administrator in the world, and he has been our Vice Chancellor for several years. Professor Kumar has a degree, a PhD degree from IIT Madras in electronic devices and subsequently a postdoctoral research in University of Waterloo. He has taught at IIT Kharagpur and then joined IIT Delhi, and now he's our Vice Chancellor. And even if he's Vice Chancellor, he still teaches in IIT Delhi every morning and then comes to JNU as a Vice Chancellor. He's a very popular teacher and is liked by his students. And in JNU, he has been instrumental in creating new institutions, and most important of them are actually the School of Engineering and School of Management, and also School of Sanskrit and Indic Studies. And I would like to especially mention that in the School of Engineering, he has started a dual degree program where a student gets a BTech, 4-year BTech and 1-year MS degree in different areas. And one of the areas for MS is computational linguistics. And I'll be helping on that school in getting that done. So I'm sure Professor Kumar has been very, very instrumental, and he will be continuing to help us in creating a viable ecosystem in JNU. And now I welcome and invite Professor Kumar to give his inaugural talk. Professor Kumar, you can unmute yourself. You are a co-host now. Unmute yourself.
Hello, good morning to all the participants, Professor Girishnathja, and my JNU colleagues, students, the participants from across the country, and also the experts who are part of this webinar. Let me extend a warm welcome to all of you. You know, the academia and government, they frequently meet and talk to each other. And the academia gets help from the government. But however, bringing the academia, government, and the industry on one single platform is a very, very appreciable effort, particularly from the standpoint of JNU, because JNU has existed for last 50 years with numerous contributions in different fields. But one area in which we lagged behind was interaction with the industry, collaboration with the industry. Although at individual faculty level, there have been some efforts during last 3-4 years at the university level, we have made it one of our focal points to interact with industry and to collaborate with industry. As Professor Girishnathja has mentioned, although we are very good at basic research and social sciences and humanities, in order to take our basic research towards product development, we have formed a School of Engineering, and we have also formed Atal Bihari Vajpayee School of Management and Entrepreneurship. And very recently, we have established Atal Incubation Center, JNU Foundation for Innovation as a Section 8 company in the campus. Already we have 3 startup companies functioning from the JNU campus. So recently we have applied for about 455 crores HIFA funding, and a large chunk of that money is reserved for creating a state-of-the-art building on the campus, with the hope that in the next 5 years or so, we will have close to about 100 startup companies functioning from the campus. Having said that, the area in which our university faculty, some of them are working in languages and computer interfacing, and the experts who have come here, this is a highly potential area for a couple of reasons. You see that, let me mention 2 areas where this is very, very important. One, of course, as all of you know, that in our country, we have more than 500 million smartphone users. But you see, most of the smartphone operating systems are in English. We have only about close to 125 million people in the country who are familiar with English. So this is one area I think this language interface with technology can bring a lot of changes. What about the other 800 million Indians who do not have smartphones? Well, it is the language barrier. And even those who are using, they still have the language barrier. Can we use our technology and language expertise to create operating systems and to create the user interface for these users in their local languages. This is something that I think we need to take seriously, because although there are major languages that are used by nearly 95% of Indians, there are hundreds of other languages which are used by that small section of Indians, about 5 to 6% of them. So why should they be left behind? Can we develop these interfaces in their local languages? This is one area I think we can seriously look at, because this is an area where you require computer specialists and also the language experts. Another area where I see a large potential for experts working in this area is, if you look at the habits of the youngsters, nowadays, a lot of youngsters, they don't have time to read books. So they use audio books. Can we create audio books in various Indian languages so that the knowledge that is embedded in the literature in India in different languages can be brought to the attention of these youngsters? This is one other area where I think there is a lot of potential for industries to come forward and work with academia, so that you can even establish startup companies. JNU will be very, very open. Even if a non-JNUite would like to establish a startup company in this language technology interface area, we'll be very glad to help them in establishing these startup companies. Having said that, it is also very heartening to see that in these difficult times, many of you have joined together on this platform to learn from each other and to think more about this area of research. I compliment all of you for being part of this webinar. Let me once again welcome all the participants to this webinar. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for giving these very encouraging words. And I'm sure the institutions you have started in JNU will go a long way in creating the necessary ecosystem in JNU. And thank you so much once again, sir.
Right.
Now I invite our speaker, Dan Van S from Google. A word about Dan. He was our speaker in our earlier seminar that we did in JNU in 2018, I believe. And he was able to present the technologies that Google is actually doing for Indian languages. So he's going to present on Google's language technologies and Indian languages. He's a technical program manager with Google Research USA, and he works on internationalization of language technology, harnessing machine learning and scalable infrastructure to bring support for new languages to products like Gboard and the Assistant. You are all familiar with Google Assistant, and it's widely used. And with so much of linguistic diversity in our world, and of course in India, Dan thinks it is a fascinating research challenge to build technology across so many different languages. With his research group, he has worked on developing smartphone keyboards, transliteration systems, speech-to-text recognition, and text-to-speech synthesis for Indian languages. And there's a lot that you can read about him by just Googling him. You can find about his research papers and articles and his various activities. May I now invite Dan to give his talk, Google's language technologies and Indian languages. He can unmute himself.
I can unmute myself. Excellent. Awesome. A very good afternoon, I guess. I'm very confused with time zones, but I think it is about like 12:15 local time in India. So
Right.
a very good afternoon to you all. And thank you so much for the welcome, and also to the Vice Chancellor for the introductory talk. Very interesting. Let me just put up my slides real quick. And that should do the trick. Okay, now you can see my slides, right? All right. Yeah. So yes, the topic today is Google's language technologies in Indian languages, right? And as you might have guessed from the description just now, we actually work on languages around the world, right? Like India is obviously a high priority for us. It's a huge country with lots of languages, but there are lots of different languages around the world. And making technology work in as many of those languages as we possibly can is really critical to Google's mission of making the world's information universally accessible and useful. And our CEO, Sundar Pichai, has also made building for everyone a core value of the company. So when you look at language technology, whether it's in India or elsewhere in the world, we're always looking at it through this lens of making the world's information universally accessible and useful. And of course, that information is stored in a lot of different languages. So, it also follows that we have to make technology work in as many languages as we can. Now, of course, there's lots and lots of languages in our world, right? There's about 7,000 linguists say these days. But actually, 7,000 is still an understatement, right? Everybody has a slightly different voice. There's more than 7 billion people, and there's more than 7 billion different voices, right? When you hear me speak, you will say, look, he's not a native speaker of American English. He has a slight accent. And in fact, I am Dutch. I was born in the Netherlands. My native language is Dutch, and you can tell that, right? So between kind of 7,000 or so languages and 7 billion people, you have countless accents and varieties and so on. And I think when you hear statistics like India having 10,000 languages and dialects, I think it's probably an undercount, right? There are so many different accents and varieties. And so what kind of follows, right, is that there's not really a single cookie cutter approach that works for everyone here. You can't say, look, we are going to build the technology once and then it will just work. You really have to build it for every language, but you also have to understand for the speakers of each language what is going to be the most helpful technology. And in fact, for every individual speaker, you have to wonder what is the most helpful technology, right? You might speak the same language, but like one speaker might be literate and one speaker might not be literate, and different technologies are going to be useful to different people, right? So that's something that we always really care about, like what is most helpful to each user of each language. Now, as the Vice Chancellor was also just saying, smartphones these days have become really widespread. And so if you wonder what is going to be the most helpful, one of the most common requests is actually, look, I just want to be able to input in my language or languages of choice on my smartphone. With smartphones and connectivity now widely available, even 2 years ago, I think when I was in India, 4G was just widely available in lots of places that I went. Smartphones and connectivity have really brought lots of new users online. And what they mostly use their smartphone for, right? Initially, it's to stay in touch with family and friends. We have a lot of people doing research in different countries around the world and trying to understand how people use these technologies when they come online. So initially, they use technologies like chat apps, social media, and they just want to stay in touch with family or friends or, employment opportunities. But it's mostly like about that mission of connecting people. But then eventually, when people gain a bit of familiarity, they start sharing knowledge and finding information using search engines or Q&A platforms and things like that. Maybe attending some talks or watching videos. There's lots of ways that people can kind of get knowledge from the internet, right? But of course, historically, most languages, most of those 7,000 or so languages have not been reflected in technology. And this is obviously a problem because if you come online and you have a smartphone, but it doesn't have any content in your language and it doesn't have the ability to, offer you input in your language, then it's going to be a serious usability barrier. Now, as technologists, something we kind of easily jump to is saying, okay, well, look, then we should actually build this technology in all these different languages, right? Which I think is the right direction. But one thing to remember is that it's also a phenomenon that mirrors the offline world, right? So in a lot of these languages where today there is no speech recognition technology, there is no text-to-speech technology, there also is a lack of visibility in the offline world, right? So for example, there might not be a newspaper in that language either. And so this is not something that is new to tech or unique to tech. It's something that needs to be solved, right? But I think it's something that goes beyond tech, and it's a question for society as a whole, maybe, to see how can we make those languages, thrive and support them and so on, right? But all the same, this gap in technological support needs to be addressed, and especially, I think, personally, where literacy is low and voice can really make a big difference in terms of people finding information and sharing information. So you might wonder, what is the process to actually add support for more languages like? And one thing that we find helpful is to think of it as currently kind of a pyramid that we would all like to be more of a skyscraper. Pyramids kind of, have fewer things at the top. Skyscrapers go straight. So let me just walk you through the pyramid. And, the bottom layer of this pyramid, again, that should really be a skyscraper, is that there's about 7,000 living languages in the world today. And that's this bottom layer here. Now, out of those, it's not really clear how many have some written tradition, but it seems to be at least 3,000. We've done some work where we've been able to find at least, I think, 2,500 or so languages written on the internet. And there's probably more, but it's very hard to find them because we don't know what the written tradition looks like, right? Like, we don't know how people in a specific community are choosing to write their language on social media. We do know that they are doing it, because if you ask people, are you typing in your language on social media, on chat apps, usually the answer is yes, we are. And when you ask them, how did you come up with the orthography, they say, look, we just came up with our own spelling system, if there wasn't already one. So we think it's more than 3,000, but we don't know where that number actually is today. Now, almost all of those 3,000 are supported by Unicode today. There are some that are not yet supported by Unicode. And, especially in India, where there's a lot of vibrant local communities coming up with their own writing systems, and Unicode hasn't quite added all of them, but like most of the major ones are in Unicode. And basically everything that's in Unicode, almost all of it is now supported by Google's free Nodo fonts that you can just go get at google.com/get/Nodo, and the Harfbuzz renderer, which kind of takes these fonts and renders them on an operating system so that they look good. So that kind of gives you the ability to, convey text information and to visually display it and so on. But of course, you also need to be able to display that text. Beyond being able to display it, you need to be able to input it. So today, our keyboard app on Android has about 900 language varieties. It's called Gboard, and it covers about 95% of the world in their first language. I kind of lost track of how many Indian language varieties we have, but we must have about 100 or so. I think maybe 120. Have a keyboard with transliteration technology where people can just type in the English alphabet and get like Devanagari or Tamil script or whatever out. So that's quite a few language varieties supported already, but still, obviously, there's 6,000 or so that we haven't been able to cover yet. And then currently, kind of the top of the pyramid is speech to text, speech recognition and text to speech. That's available in fewer languages, like about 130 for speech to text and 60 for text to speech, at least when you look at Google's technology. And on top of those technologies, we built stuff like the Google search engine or the Google Assistant or Google Translate. And so that's kind of what the pyramid looks like today. Again, we would like for this to be less of a pyramid, right? Like, it should ideally go straight up. And there's a lot of work going on in both academia and industry to, example, at CMU, they are doing a lot of work on making this happen. And Johns Hopkins is doing a lot of work on this. But of course, there's also a lot of industry players. And, I know there's lots of Indian universities as well looking at this problem. Developing their own text-to-speech, and I know TDIL has, done some of that. CDAC has done, a bunch of important work. So there's a lot going on here. For now, it looks like a pyramid, but hopefully soon it will look less like a pyramid. Now, just to zoom in a little bit on India, right? We've actually been working on this specific problem of language technology in India for many years. So even if I take you back about 3 years. Which seems like a lifetime ago now, but in 2017, we actually launched machine translation in 11 of India's national scheduled languages of the 8th schedule. So, not just Hindi, but also Punjabi and Bangla and Marathi and Gujarati, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, Sindhi, and Urdu. Later on in 2017, just a few weeks later, we actually also supported all the 22 scheduled languages in India. And by now, like I said, we actually have more than 100 different languages in India supported in Gboard, which is, I think, the highest number that any keyboard app on Android these days has in India. And then also we enabled voice typing for more Indian languages. And this is just 3 years ago. Obviously, we've been working on this a lot since then. So, some more recent announcements, for example, included the Bolo app, which is also known as Read Along in the rest of the world, because the rest of the world doesn't know Hindi and doesn't appreciate the pun in Bolo, I think. But this is an app where it uses offline on-device speech recognition to help kids improve their reading skills. And it basically works by showing some text that, kids can read and then on-device speech recognition is processing it. And if you say the wrong word or if you get stuck, then the kind of reading tutor will help you. And this features a lot of stories from the Indian Pratham Books' Storyweaver, which is very cool. So there's a lot of Indian language on Storyweaver, by the way. It's really awesome. So that's one thing. Another thing we have done is live transcribe, which is helpful for the deaf or the hard of hearing. So it basically offers speech recognition where you can just enable it and like it kind of captions your conversation. So it's very helpful for the deaf or hard of hearing, or anyone that wants to transcribe things. And also in the accessibility space, we've announced 2 other research projects called Paratron and Euphonia, which again are aiming to help technology make technology more accessible for accessibility purposes. So in this case, for people with speech impairments, you can go and search for them on your favorite search engine, and you will find some great demo videos. I won't play them now, but they are very cool. Also, I didn't have time to put this on this slide, but actually we also just recently launched Google Translate in the Odia language with help from the local community through the Translate community. So that was really exciting. So as you can see, we've been thinking about this problem on a global scale, but also like building technology and solutions specifically for India, covering lots of different languages and lots of different use cases. One that I can kind of zoom into is Gboard, which I just mentioned. I've worked on this a lot. And like I said, it has about 900 or so language varieties these days. It's actually been very warmly received. So, we don't just support the 22 scheduled languages of India in Gboard. We support some of them with different writing systems. For example, Manipuri can be written in different scripts, different writing systems. And so we support multiple. We have transliteration, and we don't just support those 22, right? We also support Mizo, for example, or many other Indian languages. Overall, there's about 70 unique scripts supported today. And in general, users are very happy when their languages are added, right? Like, it's not that people weren't using their language, they were just using all sorts of workaround. And so when they don't have to use those workarounds, they're happy. But one problem that we have found is later on when we do follow-up studies with different speakers of the language, people haven't really discovered that they actually do have the ability now to type in their language on their smartphone in their preferred script with transliteration and whatnot. Because people have kind of decided that, it's probably not going to be supported. I'm not even going to look for it anymore. And it's hard to find it in the settings. So we've added some functionality to help with that. You can like share these links from the Gboard app. And if you enter this on your Android phone, it will help you set it up very quickly. So you can just add the language onto the existing languages. If you want to read more about this, we actually have an entire technical report that also goes into the Indian situation in quite a bit of detail. It's over on the Google Research website. It's just called Writing Across the World's Languages, so you can search for it. So this is just one example where just building the technology isn't good enough, right? You also need to make sure that it really fits with people's use cases, with what people need the technology for, but also making sure that people understand how to set it up easily, how to configure things, how to actually access it, right? The availability of the technology is no good if users can't actually find it, if they can't use it, if it's too hard for them to use, if you have to go into some obscure settings menu. That is not going to work very well, even if the technology technically exists, right? So that's something that I think is also important to keep in mind. It's not just about building the technology, it's also about making sure that people can access it and find it and use it easily. So that's just one case study. There's a lot more we can say about different technologies, but given that this is a research audience and there's a lot of people watching here, hopefully the next crop of undergraduate and graduate students who are going to help solve the problems that the field still has. We really need you. There's a lot of problems. I just wanted to briefly talk about some trends that you might be interested to follow. You probably already are following them if you're a more seasoned researcher, but if you're newer to the field, just a couple of trends that are worth thinking about, right? So historically, technology was kind of built for one language at a time, right? Like you would build a model for Hindi, and then you would say, look, the model for Hindi is done, and now let's build a model for Tamil, and you would kind of keep going like that, right? But that's not really the most efficient way to build these models, it turns out, right? There's a lot of work now on multilingual models, whether it's for speech recognition or speech synthesis, for translation, for natural language processing. And the reason that this is a promising direction, and I think an exciting direction, especially in scenarios where resources are scarce, as we were just hearing, is also the case in India, obviously, as it is in many other places around the world, of course. With these multilingual approaches, you can exploit linguistic similarities and reduce data needs so that you can add new languages with a lot less data than you would otherwise need, which is very exciting in that mission of getting as many languages, to have technology as we want. And in fact, there's some work now where you can use 0 target language data. I'll talk about it a little bit. Another interesting thing, I think it's fascinating, is unsupervised machine translation. So historically, when you want to make a translation system, you need to have a parallel corpus, right? So you need to have the sentences in, like, for example, Hindi, and then you need to have the sentences, the corresponding translations in English. And you would make that translation model by just showing it the sentences in English and then showing it the sentences that correspond to those English sentences in Hindi, and you would build a translation system. But now, with recent advances, there's a thing called unsupervised machine translation, where it magically, even without any parallel text, it just needs monolingual text, so text in one language in both the languages. It can just make a machine translation system that works fairly decently. And of course, this is exciting because parallel text is relatively rare compared to monolingual text. So that's something I'm excited about. Another direction, also very important, is called federated learning. This is a little new, but basically what happens there is that the device, the training of the machine learning models all happens on the device. It's actually open source in TensorFlow. And if you're curious about how this works, so basically, like, a lot of different smartphones all participate in training one shared machine learning model with enhanced privacy. You can check out federated.withgoogle.com. There's quite a bit of detail there, and Google has invented this technology and published quite a bit of research on it as well. But there's an accessible and easy to follow initial introduction at federated.withgoogle.com. And again, it's open source in Google's TensorFlow toolkit, so you can also use it for your own research. Another thing I think personally is very interesting is accessibility research. I already mentioned Paratron and Euphonia, but also, for example, sign language recognition, right? I haven't really talked about sign languages yet, but of course they are important languages in their own right. And there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in that field as well. In an Indian context, I would be seriously neglecting the linguistics situation on the ground if I didn't mention code switching, right? Like Hinglish or Banglish or anything like that. It remains a super important area to understand better. And then there's also just lots of research needed on semantics, pragmatics, and dialogue, and there's a ton of open challenges, really. But if you ask me what's going to be most helpful in the quest to support as many languages as we can, I think it's probably some of these things that you see here on this slide. And let me just really quickly highlight two bits of recent work from the group specifically that I work on these days. So like I just said, historically you've needed like quite a large amount of audio and text data to build a model in a given language, right? And that's really not ideal because you want to be able to support as many languages as you can, right? So we've been looking at how we might be able to reduce the amount of audio and text data that you need in large, to build like a good model. And so there's these two papers. You can just check them out. They are open access. One of them, led by my colleagues Ai3LT and Anjali Kannan with Google Speech, they've looked at speech recognition with a multilingual model. So it puts 9 Indian languages into a single end-to-end speech recognition model, and seriously improves the quality with less data. So that's really exciting work. This is an end-to-end speech recognition model, so it's the latest research frontier also for the field of speech recognition as a whole. So it's very exciting. There's this blog post, and we presented the work at Interspeech last year, so you can go check it out. The other thing, also led by a colleague from the Google Speech group, Manasa Prasad, is to look at building large vocabulary ASR systems for languages without any audio training data. So basically what that looks at is the phonemes, the sounds of various Indian languages are very similar to the sounds of other Indian languages. So why can't you just take the phoneme recognition model from one language and apply it to another language? And you can actually build fairly decent speech recognition systems that way without having any sort of audio data in the target language. There's zero audio data in the target language that you need, but as long as you have, let's say, a model that's been built for Hindi or for Tamil or for Bangla, you can then kind of take some parts of that model and reuse them for other languages, combining them with text data. So I think these are very interesting directions, and we will see more of this kind of research in the future going forward. Now, as the Vice Chancellor also just mentioned, the ecosystem here is very important, right? This is not just something where a few industry companies are building something. Building successful language technology that works and helps people with their problems requires a very diverse ecosystem, whether it's in terms of the speakers of the language themselves, of course. There's activists and community workers, there's academics, policymakers, industry. There's a lot of people involved in this, and this is one of the reasons that we are also so happy that we have now established a Google AI group in India that is specifically working on all sorts of challenges around language technology. Unfortunately, I have not yet been able to visit because of the current situation, the global situation that we all find ourselves in, but we are starting to work together. We have hired a bunch of people in India now, and they are beginning to do super interesting research. I wish I could be there personally right now even and meet you all in person, as I'm sure it's the case for everybody, but hopefully soon again. But in the meantime, I can tell you about the open source ecosystem a little bit as well, beyond just the people ecosystem, right? There's also an open source ecosystem. So there's a lot of third-party Android keyboards these days as well. I already mentioned TensorFlow, our machine learning toolkit, which also has machine translation recipes. You can just use them on Google's Colab, where you even get free access to GPUs if you qualify as an academic researcher. The Nodo fonts that I just mentioned are completely open source, and there's many other libraries and tools as well. But even beyond Google, there's ICU and CLDR, which are maintained by Unicode, and there's a lot going on there. And increasingly, data sets are widely available openly too. So if you are looking for Google-created speech data in some Indian languages, you can actually just go to OpenSLR, Open Speech and Language Resources.org, and you can just download data for training speech recognition models or training speech synthesis models. So that's just available there. Another thing that I think is super important, and of course, currently we're doing it via webinars, but I think it is really important that, there's a lot of exchange of knowledge between academia and industry, so people can share research no matter where you are in the world. So, we've always supported conferences like Interspeech and ACL every year. Interspeech actually took place in India a few years ago. I think it was in 2018, and it was really excellent to see so many people there. So that's something that we are very dedicated to supporting as well, those kinds of exchanges. So I guess maybe I'll take 5 more minutes and tell you about this one new thing that is really just hot off the press a few weeks ago. If you haven't heard of it, it might be interesting to you. So like I already said, we have a lot of open source code and machine learning systems and fonts and, data sets. But this one data set led by my colleague Brian Rourke is new. It's a set of romanization resources for Indian languages. So if you go onto GitHub, you can just download it. And basically what it is it has, for a lot of languages, it has text from Wikipedia with a romanization lexicon. So it might have text from the Hindi Wikipedia or the Bangla Wikipedia or, the Gujarati Wikipedia or whatever. And then it has those sentences alongside human provided romanized, so transliterated transcripts, which, you can use to build to build transliteration systems. There's also a romanization lexicon that's included. So as far as we know, this is probably one of the biggest data sets of romanized data around, and it's parallel. So you can also use it to build models that go from, transliterated English alphabet text in an Indian language into the actual native script for that language. We think this is very exciting. We've used this in, for example, in Gboard to build the transliteration algorithms in Gboard that are, powering the technology when you type NAMASTE. it outputs the Hindi equivalent in Devanagari script, right? And so we think it's really exciting. We're happy to be able to share this. There's a paper on this published at ELRA, which was supposed to take place in May in France. You know, we have the paper out on arXiv, so you can just read it there. And like I said, this data set is freely available. It's just on GitHub. So, you know, we welcome any, you know, papers that use it, and we look forward to seeing what you all do with it. I'm sure there are cool things you can think of that we haven't even thought of yet. All right, so that's kind of all the content that I had. I just wanted to say thank you again to the folks at JNU and you know, everybody who spent time organizing this. I know it's not easy shifting things to online, and so I wanted to thank you all, and thank you all as well for taking the time to you know, come and listen. I'm personally very excited about what's happening in the field of Indian language technology. There's a lot of cool things going on, whether it's you know, research by academics, or you know, product development by you know, industry, whether it's large companies or small startups. I've personally had the pleasure of meeting many folks working in the startup ecosystem in India as well. It's been great. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing what you all do. And that's all I have for now. So I will hand it back to the organizers. I think there's maybe a Q&A centrally at the end.
Yeah, we'll have Q&A at the end. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you so much, Dan, for covering a lot of areas actually in Indian language technology. The work of Google is well known, especially in machine translation, used widely in India. And you said you have done 11 languages. And for the transliteration, Gboard supports all 22 languages and many, many scripts. And also, you are working on the code switching, which is a very important area, because most Indians are bilingual, even multilingual, and they switch codes very frequently between English and other languages, or between other languages. So that is certainly a challenge. And with the data set that you just introduced, the Dakshina data set, I'm sure our researchers will be able to download that from the GitHub and try to explore you know, how we can best maybe complement it or use it for our own research. Thank you so much once again, Dan. I know we missed you in ELRA. In our webinar, you were supposed to be there, but you could not come because of your shifting, as you said, and you gave a very good talk in our seminar earlier in JNU. Thank you so much once again, and hope this Corona things gets over soon. And when you come to India, would like to invite you to come to JNU. Thank you so much once again.
It will be my pleasure. I cannot wait.
Thank you. But you know, our student works with you, Aisha Banerjee, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. She joined Google a while ago. Yeah. It's always great when like you have more folks joining with like tremendous expertise in the area, right? I mean, obviously I'm Dutch. I've worked a lot on India lately, but I've also worked on many other languages around the world. So it's really good to have the local subject matter experts as well. Like you could just see with the research as well, right? That was all led by folks, you know, from India. Maybe they were not working for Google in India, but like, you know, a lot of research happening with lots of students from the field in India, you know, getting into the research.
Thank you so much once again, Dan. I hope you'll stay till the end, right? It's not too late for you. Right? Okay, yep. Great. Thank you. So now I move on to the next speaker, which is Khalid Chukri. People know about Khalid already because he's the Secretary General of ELRA, European Language Resource Association, the organization which actually holds ELREC every 2 years. And we do a workshop under ELRA. We have been doing actually consistently for last five occasions actually. So Khalid is electrical engineer by profession. You know, he did his degree from École Nationale de l'Aviation Civile. Khalid, you will excuse my French pronunciation. And has a master's degree and a doctoral degree also in computer science, signal processing. So he's basically a speech person from the language technology perspective, and has been very, very active. And he's been a speech consultant with French institutions and companies, and prominent among them being Capgemini and Thomson. Since 1995, he has been Secretary General of the European Language Resource Association, and also founder and CEO of the distribution agency called ELDA. It's very important that resources are created, curated, maintained, and distributed, in an ecosystem which benefits all. This is what in India we should also try to explore. So in India, we have worked a little bit towards that, and still trying to monetize our resources. CDAC is going to host our data that we created for 70 languages, and we are ready to sign the contract now. So past 30 years, Khalid has been working on various aspects of spoken and written language technologies with focuses on multilingual and multicultural aspects in academic and industrial environments. And he's also a chair of the ISO SC35 in charge of the human-machine interfaces and accessibility, and is actually has been involved in other standardization activities of ISO. And he's been very kind to accept our invitation and give this keynote address. Thank you, Khalid, once again. And now you are on the mic. Khalid, you can unmute yourself. Khalid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor to be with you, even remotely today. It would have been a great pleasure to be with you physically, but as Dan said, we will just shift this to other better times. Let me try to share my screen. It's this one. Okay, I guess you can see my my slides.
Yeah.
Good. I'll just switch off the camera to get some better bandwidth. If needed, I'll switch it on again. Okay. Yeah. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very grateful to Professor Garish for the invitation. I will share with you some of our experience on language resources and language technology evaluation, the things that we have been doing for the last 30 years, including with very strong partnership with our Indian friends and colleagues with whom we started working already 15, 20 years ago. And I'm sure that we can learn from each other experience on this. So this is a very quick overview. I'll tell you a little bit about the data paradigm, but I think Dan already elaborated on that in very detail. I'll tell you a little bit about the core activities we are carrying in ELRA and the different catalogs where we store language resources that could be useful for research, but also for technology development. I'll focus on the under-researched languages, and we'll see that even some of the big languages spoken by hundreds of millions are still lacking resources, and then about some of the events that we organize to make sure that all this is known. So a very quick reminder or hint, if we look at the internet today and just focus on YouTube, we would see that almost 300 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube every minute. We see that 80% of the viewers are from outside the US, so it's not really US centered. And today, if we look at the details, we will see that you can navigate in something less than 80 different languages, and YouTube has local versions in 88 countries. So if you just focus on this number, 76 different languages, and you compare it to what Dan said, 7,000 human languages worldwide, you can see the path to go and what remains. I try to imagine that if we wanted to transcribe all this audio data and do some search and some reading instead of listening, assuming that we need 3 to 50 times of labor to transcribe the data, which means 50 hours of labor for 1 hour of audio. It means that every minute would require 3 persons full time for a full year, just to transcribe 1 minute of YouTube data. So you can imagine the huge requirement or the huge burden. Now, if you see that most of these YouTubes are in languages that are not ours, and we need to translate them, that's yet another big issue. We have these estimates that are a little bit obsolete, but more or less 500, 600,000 translators worldwide, professional translators. And translation is a critical issue in ecosystems that are multilingual. In Europe, we have about 24 official languages, which makes it over 500 language pairs. In South Africa, about 110. I'm sure that with the 22 or 23 official languages of India, you have almost 500 pairs, and so on. So if we need to translate all these languages, you can imagine the effort. And here we definitely need the support of natural language technologies to help with this. Some of the modalities that we usually mention when we talk about what we do within ELRA and with our community, we mentioned speech dictation, the speech transcription, etc. We also do a lot of text management and text analysis. I'm sure that most of you are working either on the sentiment analysis or Twitter analysis to get some of this hate speech out of the internet. Sign language is also an important piece of activity. I think it's very critical and very crucial in terms of accessibility. This is a must. And to those who are working on machine translation, translating from language A to language B, should also consider that they can translate from sign language A to sign language B, but also from sign language A to an audio or text language B. Handwriting is very important. A lot of our archives have been written handwriting, and we need to address this as well. And we can go ahead with gesture, images, biometric data, and so on. And all this in some multilingual setting. That's really very important. And if I associate to this some of the applications that we are looking at now, we can see that we do have this person localization and tracking, and I will show you some of the work that we have been doing. Person identification verification, that's really important. Everyone is working today on a number of biometric factors to identify people, but speech is one of this. Speech recognition, conversational speech recognition, emotion identification, and I think the best and easy application that my community has been promoting for some time is this speech-to-speech translation, where I can speak French today. Some automatic speech recognition is carried out, and the text is then translated in Hindi, so you can hear my voice in Hindi while I'm speaking French. This has been for a while the best application that the community can show. Is the data important for all these technologies? I have a very old slide here where we try to, colleagues try to add data into their machine learning algorithm. So you can see This is the performance of the system. This is the quantity of the data. This happened to be a machine translation system. And what they started pouring in is more and more resources. And you can see that without any change in the technology, just adding resources is a key. Now, this is doable for languages that have a lot of resources, but as Dan said, there are a number of research topics where we can where we are trying to get rid of the resource for a number of languages that don't have necessarily audio or text data in quantity that is shown here. Now let me go back very quickly to ELRA, the European Language Resources Association. It was created in 1995, and the main rationale behind this is to make sure that researchers and industry can share language resources and also conduct technology evaluation to assess the performance and state of the art. We are a non-for-profit association. We still have this European tag on the name, but we are an international player and our members are all over the world. What we do primarily is all tasks related to the identification and sharing of language resources. So we are taking care of all the commercial issues that are involved. We're taking care of all the legal issues, negotiating of licenses, clearing the intellectual property right, but also doing a lot of information dissemination, and I will come back to that. And we have conducted a number of evaluation challenges with partners to make sure that we have a clear state of the art, but also we can capitalize on these evaluation campaigns to package the resources used in the evaluation and make them available anytime. This is a highlight of this activity. We are a kind of middleman between users and providers. For the providers, we try to identify who are the key players that can help provide resources in particular, and we disseminate this information. We also conduct activities like validation and quality assessment of resources, production of resources in a number of settings that I will mention to you, and then the evaluation, as I said. This is the easy way to show what are the resources that we have in our catalog. We do have, as I said, speech resources, written resources, multimedia, multimodal, and evaluation packages. And we try to have this for all the languages that we can get. Today we have about 100 languages, not all of them well served, but you should always keep in mind when I talk about 100 languages, this is compared to the 7,000 word languages. Some of the examples that I mentioned, we do have this video annotated resources where we try to understand who is speaking in a TV show, particularly for the TV news, and what they are saying. So the team here took a large number of recordings, and we tried to annotate the video, but also the audio. So you can see that we are in a scene like this. We try to annotate all the information that appears on the video, but also all the speech that is uttered by the speakers. We have something similar where we try to capture information in a meeting room. So here you can see that we are trying to identify who is speaking, who is moving around, who is in the room, and so on, using a number of cameras and microphone. And we try to make sure that this information is tagged and used by the researchers for fusion of multiple sensor information. We do work on machine translation, and this is one of the current ways of doing machine translation, where we try to have corpora in bilingual setting. Here we have English and French, and we try to make sure that sentences are aligned. And with some of these neural networks, we can learn the best translation system from one language to another. I also mentioned, I hope you can see this, we have a German sentiment analysis where the German tweets are analyzed by linguists and annotated with a number of tags with respect to the sentiment. It could be just saying that this is positive, negative, but it could be also more elaborate than that. We do, as I said, a number of evaluation projects. This is one of the projects that we did recently about the automatic processing of digital documents. Just imagine that we do have a number of documents in a large number of languages, mostly handwritten, and the idea is to try and understand the content, analyzing the scan. So here you can see one of these application forms that we would like to turn into a digital document. You can also see here a map written in Arabic where we want to make sure that this is also converted into a digital document using OCR tools and services. So this is the kind of language resources we do. When we identify them and negotiate the rights, we put them into an ELRA catalog. This catalog is available to everyone. I think I checked the figures recently. We went over this 30% of free of charge for research purposes. Some of them are even free of charge for everyone. We do have what we call the universal catalog. This is a catalog where we store all information that we collect from the community to make sure that if you want something about whatever language, you can check this catalog. If it doesn't exist on the ELRA catalog or the LDC catalog or on other data center catalogs, Universal Catalog is supposed to be the archiving house for all these resources. We introduced it since 2010, the two next initiatives, the LRE map and the ELRA Share Your Language Resources. LRE map is a very nice initiative that I will develop and elaborate upon later on. ELRA Share Your Resources is a service that we offer with ELREC, which is our major conference, where we try to encourage people to share their resources. And every 2 years, we make a very big package out of this. And they are very often usable with very, very permissive language resources. In this slide, we have a few figures. Sorry, I didn't update it for today, but what is really important for us is the low part of the slide. We are distributing resources to, you see here, 60% non-ELRA members. So we are really open to everyone. 54% of the resources we distribute are for free, 66% for research purposes, and we see that a lot of our partners are working on speech and not in text. And we can see that 45% of our distribution is outside of the European context or European sphere. Here you have the example of our catalog. If you go to the ELRA catalog, just Google ELRA catalog, you can see that we do have all these resources that you can see the metadata, you can select the resources you need, and if these are free resources, you can either download them or get them shipped to you through FTP quickly. The LRE map is really an interesting initiative that we took almost 10 years ago with a large number of partners, including from India. The idea at that time was to collect and compile data from all the papers that were submitted to ELRA. And just for information, we get very often around 1,300, 1,400 submissions to ELRA. And out of this, we accept about 800 papers. Most of these papers are related to language resources and evaluation. And the idea is to make sure that these resources are supplied and documented. So what we try to get is a clear picture of what exists for all the languages. And this will help identify the gaps and then bring some input and feedback to our governments or funding agencies. Very often we produce what we call the LRE map matrices, and I will show you a very quick example. We started, as I said, this LRE map with ELREC, which is the Language Resource and Evaluation Conference that is organized by ELRA, but you can see that it has been extended to a large number of conferences, including Interspeech and ACL. And the nice thing is this is really community built, because the papers and the metadata we get are from the authors. What we get and what we ask people to enter into this LRE map when they submit papers is the language resource name, the type of the resource, the languages, and so on. And really the important thing is the licensing. We try to promote the flexible and permissive licenses like Creative Commons, and we hope that this will be the major trend. This is a screenshot of this LRE map. So again, if you Google LRE map ELRA, you will find it. What you can find here is all the metadata element from the resource type, the production status, and the conferences. And here you can see the name of the resource, some more information about the resource. And if you click on the details, you can get the paper that has that mentioned this resource in its publication. What we call the LRE matrices is something that we developed, where we take all the papers that are that report on resources, and we try to compile some figures about the resources that are listed. And here you can see a very quick example where we have the list of resource type, list of languages, and then the number of times that some of the resources were listed. For instance, if we stick to English, we see that in the resources we had, I think this is from 2016, we had something like 87 resources that were listed by the authors in the LRE map conferences. The next initiative is the Share Your Language Resources. This is an open challenge, and we try to encourage the community to share whatever they have, including the resources produced by PhD students for research purposes. I think it's really important to make sure that every piece of resource is made available. We continue to do this for EREC 2018, but also for EREC 2020 that we had to cancel. But the resources that were submitted by our colleagues are made available. Some of the examples of the resources that we have produced, I wanted to focus on some of the resources that are of interest to our community today. Basically, ELRA produce resources on demand, either in some governmental setting or for private partners. We very often produce that in international partnership with the support of local institutions. We worked with SIDAC, we worked with a number of partners in India a number of times. And by doing this, we produced some of the resources that you can see here. For instance, this SpeechDat is a large initiative that allowed us in consortia with groups ranging from Microsoft, Motorola, Nuance, and so on to produce data across South America, data across the Mediterranean area from North Africa to the Middle East. And also, and I think this is the slide that I really wanted to show, we also produced a number of resources in the Southeast Asia or in Asia, in particular in India. It was a very great pleasure to work with a number of partners in India to produce in particular Hindi as a first language or Hindi as second language, but also English as spoken in India. And it was a very nice and efficient cooperation. We highly appreciate the expertise and skills of our colleagues in India. And I am mentioning this as one way to go in order to produce a large number of resources. The basic principle for producing either this Lila or the other languages was to make sure that, for instance, if I look at the South America and North America resources, the agreement was, let's ask one of the partner to produce a specific country with the same criteria, with same quality. So if someone produces Venezuela, for instance, they will bring this Venezuelan speech data, get it validated by an evaluation or validation center. And if it's the quality expected, they can take from the archives all the other languages. So for one language produced by partner A, they can get all the other languages. And instead of investing, in 10 or 15 production projects, one can produce, invest in only one language and gain access to all other languages free of charge. So this is one of the ways we produce resources. This is another project that we started a few years ago and that continues. It's called the European Language Resource Coordination. This is based on some European regulations about the public sector information. Public sector is basically data produced by the public bodies all across Europe. And this European directive encouraged them or even forced them today to make these resources available to research and commercial activities. This kind of resources could be textual data produced by the public sector. It could be reports. It could be bilingual, multilingual resources. And the idea is to make sure that this is made available in terms of data for the research that we are conducting. Up to today, I think we have something like 3,000 resources for machine translation, which is the focus. And most of these free resources are available also through ELRA, and you can download them. You can see we have Maltese English, we have Greek English, we have French Italian, and so on for machine translation. The jargon that the European institutions and the European countries are using in their daily activities. A next important activity that we have is a special interest group called the SIGUL, Special Interest Group in Indo-Resource Languages, that we have set up in partnership with EnterSpeech a few years ago. The idea of this special interest group is to make sure that we support linguistic diversity all over the world, and that we organize events and seminars related to the less resourced languages. Some of you might have seen that we organized this collaboration and computing for under-resourced languages in Miyazaki at ELRA 2018. But I hope and I'm sure that most of you went to this very impressive workshop that took place at Interspeech in Delhi on spoken language technologies for under-resourced languages with our colleagues, Professor Agrawal and Laurent Bezassier from Grenoble. So this is really a way to pay tribute to the less resourced languages. And recently we organized yet another event called International Conference for Language Technologies for All, or LT for All, with the support of, in partnership with UNESCO. That was done in the framework of the International Year of Indigenous Languages that UNESCO celebrated in 2019. And some of you attended this, and I'm very happy to see some names today. The idea of this was really to discuss the language technologies for all, and how can we make sure that these language technologies are made available on request, on demand to all communities, including communities that don't necessarily have written scripts or don't have audio data or very strong presence in the internet. One of the outcome of this LT for all is what we call the strategic outcome document, that you can see the link here, and you will be given the slides, so you can download this document. This is an international document prepared in the framework of United Nations and UNESCO. The basic things is some statements, strong statements towards our governing bodies to make sure that all communities, in particular the indigenous ones, have access on request to language technologies. I'm not going through all these statements. There were 5 or 10 statements that we produced with the organizing committee of LT for All. But the most important piece of conclusion is, after this 1 year of focus on indigenous languages, we managed to convince United Nations with other partners that it's really a long-term perspective and long-term issue. So United Nations decided that there will be a decade of focus on indigenous languages from 2022 to 2032 to try and solve some of the problems that indigenous languages are suffering from. And I'm very glad to see that we share this this focus with our colleagues from Google. LT for All was heavily supported by Google, who made it a very successful event. Very regularly, I mentioned the ELRA conference. This is one of the major events that we organized since 1998. It's a pity that we couldn't meet this year in Marseille, but this is just shift. Hopefully things will be back to normal and we will be meeting all again in 2022. I think this is the major issues that I wanted to elaborate upon today. I think the challenges is more data, even if the community is working on approaches with a little bit of data or no data. But I think some of us remember Professor Genelec statement, the best data is more data. We need to encourage our partners, in particular the private big organizations, and I'm glad to see that Google is showing the way to go, that it's important to work on less lucrative languages, less resourced languages. And I'm very glad to see that the open source spirit is really dominating the community today, with all these new approaches for which we can have access to software, open source software free of charge. Well, I think I'll stop here and maybe take questions later on. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalid. We'll take questions at the end of all the talks, so please hold on for some time. Thank you so much for presenting the activities of ELRA very elaborately, and the work that you are doing for Indian languages in partnership with CDAC and other of our colleagues in India. And you also presented the ELRA map and the ELRA catalog, which is very famous. And a lot of people actually who participate in ELRA are contributing data and resources on that platform. And the Indian languages data, particularly speech, is also very, very important. And you have done a lot of work in collecting speech data for Indian languages in partnership with some of our colleagues here. And he also talked about the LT for All conference, which was held in Paris under the Indigenous Languages Initiative of UNESCO last year. So thank you so much for presenting a very comprehensive view of the language resources and the need for working on less resourced languages. Most of the Indian languages are actually less resourced languages. So thank you once again, Khalid, and I will take the questions at the end of the last talk. Thank you so much once again.
My pleasure, thank you.
Could you please disconnect your presentation so that we can, next speaker, you can end your presentation. Thank you. Great. Now it's time to invite our next speaker, Ms. Simi Chaudhary. She is Economic Advisor and Group Coordinator at MEITY, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. And she's also currently heading the technology development for Indian languages, which is the key organization in India for the language technology in India. She's also additionally a nodal officer for RTI, Right to Information, and the director for grievances in the ministry. She has been an Indian Economic Service professional and over 23 years of Government of India services so far. In education, she has degrees from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and Delhi School of Economics, and an MBA also from IGNOU. In MEITY, she has been very actively involved in the Digital India, the flagship program of the new government, and also the Digital Northeast. She has been involved in preparing key vision documents and strategies and action plans for the ministry. And in particular, I would like to mention the report on India's $1 trillion digital opportunity that she came up with. And as you know, the digital payments in India are now very importantly being done by almost all the population. And she was very instrumental, actually involved in creating documents, necessary documents and parameters for that. And as head of the technology development for Indian languages, she has been involved in natural language translation mission of the Government of India, which is now currently going on in full speed. And besides the MEITY, Ministry of Information Technology, she's also been helping other ministries, Ministry of Human Resource Development, where she helped in the Department of School Education Literacy, and also contributed immensely to Right to Education legislation, Education for All program, teacher education, elementary education policies, and National Adult Education Program, in particular, Sakshar Bharat. And in the Ministry of Labor and Employment, she was instrumental in international labor affairs, including ILO conventions and industrial policy matters. And as the head of the the technology development for Indian languages, currently she's managing, handling actually parallel projects, funded by PSA and also the Ministry of IT, and have been interacting with this group very closely. And we're trying to evolve a model where something like what ELRA does or LDC does, or maybe through a Section 8 company, that there should be a dedicated body to curate, create data, and be responsible for updating the data, maintaining the data, and for distribution of the data to these stakeholders. And that is what is very important, as highlighted by all the speakers. And so I now invite Ms. Simi Chaudhary for her talk. Simi Chaudhary, please. You can unmute yourself because you're a co-host. You can unmute yourself, Chaudhary. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Dr. Jab. Namaste and good afternoon to all joining here today. It gives me great pleasure to be a part of today's interface between the academia and industry and of the government, of course, for Indian language technology. The subject being discussed today is of critical importance and reflects the need of the hour, as the language barrier is extremely essential to be overcome to ensure digital inclusion in true sense. The TDIL program of the Government of India focuses on development of technologies, resources, and standards for Indian languages with the overall vision of ensuring inclusion of all citizens of the country and the society at large in the digital space. In the Digital India program, there is a weaving together of a large number of ideas and thoughts into a common thread of digital inclusion to transform India into a knowledge-based economy and a digitally empowered society. Inclusion, of course, has been the core of the Digital India program of the government, empowering citizens with the use of technology that is transformative, affordable, and sustainable. The Digital India program, as we all are aware, was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister of India on 1st July 2015. This month, therefore, we are celebrating the 5th anniversary of the Digital India program. The Digital India, so to say, is now resonating with the masses. Our daily average electronic transactions have increased from 66 lakh in 2014 to 16.3 crore in 2020. A total of 3,858 e-services have been enabled till May this year. Spread across the country, 3.7 lakh common services centers are bridging the digital divide by providing around 360 e-services in rural areas, as also creating entrepreneurial and employment opportunities for almost 12 lakh people with focus on women and youth. The digital payment usage has witnessed unprecedented growth. Transactions on the UPI platform have grown exponentially in the past couple of years. The monthly volume of payment transactions is 133 crore in June 2020 alone. Around 262 BPO units are functional across 123 locations in 22 states and union territories of the country, thus facilitating a balanced regional growth and creating job opportunities even in the small towns. India has also witnessed a rapid rise in the tech startups, adding over 1,300 tech startups in 2019 itself, of which 8 have turned unicorns. Emerging and nascent startups are experiencing growth at a CAGR of over 40%. The national policy on software products that has been brought out by the government in 2019 envisions developing India as a software product nation. The mobile and mobile manufacturing companies have been increasing from 2 units in 2014 to 256 units. And India has emerged as the second largest mobile manufacturing nation in the world. Towards this direction, the national policy on electronics brought out by the government in 2019 aims at positioning India as a global hub for electronic system design and manufacturing by encouraging and driving capabilities in the country for developing core components, including chipsets, and creating an enabling environment for the industry to compete globally. The story of India's digital transformation finds global resonance today. India is today in a sharply accelerating lift-off phase of its digital journey. Having built a strong digital foundation and expanded digital access, India is now poised for the next phase of growth creation, of tremendous economic value and empowering of citizens by leveraging our strengths to attain the aspirations of billions to build a self-reliant, strong, secure, and sustainable India. India's digital adoption is on a growth trajectory too. Our 67 billion diverse internet subscribers accessing digital media and content, mostly in English today, this presents a huge opportunity as well as a challenge. Therefore, there is a need for a tectonic shift in our strategy to make the content of internet available in Indian languages. Our efforts over the last 20 years through TDIL in language technology areas like information processing, OCR, speech technologies like ASR and TTS systems, and machine translation systems with active participation of academia, R&D institutions, the industry, all this has created a pathway to meet the opportunities. India, as we all know, is a land of linguistic diversity, but the majority of its citizens use their native languages in their everyday lives too. So we envision to make this tremendous wealth of resources and knowledge available in major Indian languages. Towards this end, the Natural Language Technology Mission of the Government of India aims to overcome the language barrier by harnessing the natural language technologies and emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, so that billions of aspirations meet the opportunities. And the effort is to inculcate an environment where it feels like a Bahubhashiya sitting next to every Indian, helping them to understand any resource material in their own language. Under this mission, it is envisaged to build a machine translation system which can be used to translate text and speech content from one language to another with minimal human involvement. The aim is to build speech-to-speech translation platform for Indian languages. To achieve this, the required technologies like ASR, MT, TTS, along with data will be developed. Neural machine translation has become the dominating and effective technology today. However, neural machine translation is also a data-hungry process, and Indian languages presently do not have the required parallel data of that order, and it is very expensive to build training data of that size as well. Therefore, a distributed approach, along with the participation of startups, of the academia, of the industry, is required to build that resource of data. Accordingly, under this mission of the government, we also aim to create and nurture an ecosystem involving startups, industry, academia, central government, the state governments, all together to develop and deploy innovative solutions in Indian languages and to stimulate massive public participation. The National Platform for Language Technology is one of the high-impact programs to stimulate the growth of startups in the language technology space. not only to make the resources that are created under R&D program of the government available to the industry, but also to act as a marketplace for development of language technology solutions and services. Today, I would like to emphasize that by growing our capacity in technologies that are digital and by applying them across sectors, including the language translation technologies, India is moving fast along the evolutionary path of a digital economy, wherein we will drive sustainable growth through use of technology, digital technology especially, and continuous innovation. This is the need of the hour, and I call upon all stakeholders of the ecosystem to join hands with the government towards realizing the vision of Digital India and towards creation of a digital ecosystem that provides fair and equitable opportunities to every citizen and ensures their inclusion in the mainstream. On our pathway to growth and expansion, we have to work as Team India with close involvement and participation of all stakeholders and the citizens at large so that our concerted efforts may lead India to realize its trillion-dollar digital economy opportunity by 2025, to establish India as Digital Bharat, Atmanirbhar Bharat, without any language barriers, and thus ensuring digital inclusion of all in a true sense. Today, I heard Google and ELRA highlighting their achievements made in this domain. I look forward, as part of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, to working more closely with them to learn from their experiences and to draw upon their rich expertise in the domain of language technology in our endeavor towards breaking the language barrier across the Indian languages. I would like to thank the Jawaharlal Nehru University, the Vice Chancellor and Professor Jha for organizing this very interesting interface and the very needed interface, in fact, between the academia, industry, and the government in working towards breaking the language barrier for Indian languages. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for a very elaborate presentation of the activities of Government of India and the policies and the procedures in place and the work that you're doing under Digital India program of Government of India. And as you know, we need a robust model in India because we have unparalleled diversity of Indian languages. We have 22 national languages, hundreds of 1,761 languages actually, to be precise, and each one of them might be very, very diverse and changing because of the English language being a major factor in the mixing, or English as we call it. So we need a robust model. And you talked about evolving ecosystems with the startups and academic institutions and the other companies in India. And I'm sure the government is very actively involved in creating such ecosystem in India. And one advantage of being in Delhi, like JNU in Delhi, is that we can run over to you. There is any issue, or we can certainly discuss and evolving this major ecosystem that we need in India. And with the model that we have, ELRA was presented by Khalid, and LDC is again a very pertinent model. And these multinationals, Google and Microsoft, are very actively involved. We have Samsung. So I think there's a need to have a discussion under one roof, and therefore I started this series. And the details which emerge from these meetings will be certainly good to compile and to present to the Government of India. Thank you so much once again, ma'am. Now this forum is open to questions. I had disabled chat because chat keeps on popping up on the screen. I had disabled chat. Now I have turned on the chat, and I would like to see the questions emerging. We had more than 900 unique registrations for this event. And a usual 1/3 actually are able to attend. Most of them go on the YouTube live. We also are live on YouTube. So we have almost 315 active attendees in this Zoom meeting. And I'm now looking at some of the questions that have come. I see one question coming from Ms. Manji Bhadra, and she's talking about, I think this question is directed to Google, that in the multilingual speech systems or ASRs, how would you factor the diversity and multilinguality of Indian population? Is the question. I think it's directed to Dan.
Sure. I didn't see the questions fly by, but I will answer the question that you were repeating. And basically, the multilinguality, actually helps, I think, with the code switching, because historically, right, like you would have some speech, some audio recording, and it would go to one model. That model was built for Hindi, or it was built for Tamil, or it was built for Telugu, or something like that. And it was very hard to have multilinguality supported because your model couldn't really support multiple languages in one go. But now with these models that actually do contain data from multiple languages, training data from multiple languages, they're still like not great necessarily at dealing with it, but they are much more capable already of dealing with data coming in from different languages because they have observed data from different languages at training time, right? So, historically you really needed to know what model the audio should go to, but now you can just send it to a model that has all the different languages in the model. It's still not perfect, right? Because it's not exactly the case that, for example, English is actually Hindi and English mixed together, right? Like you suddenly see like Hindi words, mixed together with English, like even at the subword level, right? So you might see like an English word take like a Hindi verb inflection or something. So it's not perfect, but I think it's a good step in the right direction for the languages that are included there. And I think there's always a lot more to be done. But even at the SLTU meeting in Delhi 2 years ago, there was a lot of excellent work presented on this topic. Columbia University is doing a lot of work in this space as well. And we just recently hired somebody from there actually who came to Columbia from India and is also working on it. So I think there's a lot happening in the space. And certainly it's easier when you have a multilingual model than when you have a lot of single monolingual models. So watch this space, I guess.
Thank you. I think I saw a question again for you, how to include Sanskrit. I don't think Sanskrit is there in your system, even I think in the translation or speech. So there was a question which just scrolled up that when do you plan to include Sanskrit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? Like I mentioned, we've been working in the field of Indian language technology for quite a few years, and we're always working to add more languages. So Sanskrit, in fact, is supported today in Gboard, the keyboard on Android. So you can just type in the keyboard. It has a transliteration model, and it has a dedicated keyboard with a dictionary and everything. But we know, of course, that beyond keyboards, there's also a need for translation and speech technologies and so on. So I don't really have any specific dates for any individual language, like when that might happen. But, we are always working on adding more. And specifically for translation, we also have a Translate community platform where, people can help by providing some translation. So it basically works by showing some sentences and asking for people to help translate them. To help create some more data, but of course I know specifically for Sanskrit, there is a lot of work that's been going on in that space already in India. So it's also something I think where you can look at what's already been going on and learn from that. So I don't really have like a specific date for any language, but we are always working to add more. We just recently were able to add Odia to Google Translate just a few months ago, so that was exciting, and we are looking forward to seeing what more we can share with you when we have it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Looking at another question, which is directed to Khalid and Simi Chaudhary together. Do you see language technology as a means to encourage the non-standard usage of a language?
Oh, that's a very big question. We clearly know that in some countries where they have national academies that standardize or normalize the languages, including the spelling, it had an impact on the language. The the way we write is standardized somehow, and so on. So if we think of language technologies as the you know, the spelling, grammar checker, etc., then yes, it has an impact. Now, if you look at the data we are analyzing from Twitter, from Facebook, etc., it's really amazing to see how the young people using these tools are ready to invent words, spelling, etc. Dan mentioned the mobile activity and code switching. We have been working on Arabic from North Africa, where we have a lot of code switching. And then you see that the young generation is inventing a completely different language. There is no punctuation. There is no, in languages that have capital letters, very often you don't have any capital letter, etc. So yes, the technology has an impact, but I don't think that it's a negative impact that would bring some disaster to the language. It's enrichment, and languages are you know, living bodies. They have been evolving over ages, and this will continue, and the language might have an impact on that as well.
Thank you, Khalid. That's certainly a difficult question, because, you know, on the one hand, every government, you know, especially in India, we talk about creating standards, you know, standards that, you know, languages kind of converge, you know. And on the other hand, we allow technology where anybody can speak his you know, diversity, explicit diversity. There is certainly a contradiction, and it's very, very important in India context. Now, another question which comes to Dan, I think it's a statement, not really a question, but I think Sanskrit to Malayalam translation supported by Google Translate. I think what the person means, is it supported? Obviously not at this point. So
yeah, that's right. Today there is no support for Sanskrit yet in Google Translate, but there is support for Malayalam. You can translate, you know, into and out of it.
Yeah. So actually, for Microsoft, we were working on Sanskrit to Hindi machine translation, and we have almost completed Sanskrit to Hindi. The reverse is being done. So maybe, you know, we can try something similar here. Another question to you, Dan. Can you speak about professional opportunities in Google for Indian computational linguists? What kind of expertise are expected from them?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. Yeah, so, you know, in general, in industry, whether it's Google or, you know, any of the other, you know, large companies or small companies, there is an increasing demand for computational linguists or linguists with a computational background. And the reason for this being, right, is once the core machine learning technology has been developed, right, so we know how to train a machine translation system, a lot of the work turns out to be linguistic work, right, where you need to make sure that the data is in the right format, and you need to have the right data in the right languages, and so on. So in general, what we look for when we hire linguists is, first of all, you know, a thorough understanding of the linguistic situation, but then also, you know, some technical skills like Python. It's great if you have some experience with Python, or you know, maybe you've trained some machine learning models with TensorFlow. These days, there are quite a few online courses available on NLP. You know, you don't have to be an expert doing the latest and greatest research on machine learning, because there's lots of people doing that already. As a computational linguist, the value that you can add is really in having that combination of linguistic knowledge and computational knowledge. So I would say take some of the online NLP courses, definitely, like, you know, do some Python if you have the opportunity. Of course, going to a place like JNU or another university to do like a master's in the field is also very helpful. But certainly there are like online NLP courses. Stanford University has put some online. Graham Neubig has put like a low resource language technology course online, which is really excellent, has a lot of information there. So I think in general, like, make sure you have a solid understanding of the linguistics and also like technical knowledge, Python, NLP, you know, play around with TensorFlow, you know, and be, you know, open to learning new things, because that's something that we all have to do in this field. It's something where nobody knows the answers to all the questions. So, you know, you have to be open to learning new things as well.
Thank you, Dan. Another question from Hardik Joshi. Does Google support student-level training online in the area of NLP and information retrieval?
Well, I don't know that like Google specifically, supports it. We do have some grants and research funding and so on that you can, if you just Google or search for like, Google academic grants and funding, there are certain programs that lots of work is funded through. But I think I would also definitely look at like Stanford scores and Graham Neubig's scores. They are excellent online courses. That you can just download videos for and watch and, follow them at your own pace. I think they're really exciting. There might be actually some similar courses in India. I don't know, if there's anything recent there. I know Graham Neubig just put his online because of the pandemic, and he basically decided to make his coursework available to everybody. I don't know if there's maybe something similar in India, but stuff like that is excellent, I think.
Another question from Nayantika Bharadwaj, directed to all the three speakers, Dan, Khalid, and Simiji. Thank you so much for your insightful talk today. I wanted to ask about how can one evolve itself within an industry. For example, I work with a startup called Panlingua. I have seen closely that despite our founders being very passionate and knowledgeable about their work, there is a struggle with both investments and innovations. What are the scenarios that a startup, which is already a startup, can move forward with? So basically looking for opportunities, how a startup can grow into MSME or, so maybe Simiji, can you take this question? You have to unmute. Oh, okay, yeah.
No, this is a good question. And in fact, I was looking forward to specifying a little more on this. I would restrict my response here to the language technology domain, although in general, there are various platforms that have been created by the government of India for engagement and promotion of startups. That is either through the startup hub that we have in MEITY, Invest India, Startup India. There are various platforms across ministries, depending on the domain in which the startups are operational and want to pursue their growth trajectory. For the language technology domain, as I had emphasized earlier, we are looking for and developing very soon an ecosystem wherein we collaborate with the startups, make use of their innovations and bring them into the main fold by helping us also evolve in the domain. For that, there are several technology, innovation challenges that are conducted by the government. And if you want to submit to those challenges, apply there, so that there is a recognition of your solution that you have to offer to the specific problems that the government is currently focusing on. There are different ones done by the consortia institutions of the Natural Language Translation Mission pilot projects as well. You could look up at MyGov, which is a good platform which keeps on advertising about the innovation challenges. And of course, we are all accessible to you to approach individually as well. So we would look forward to working with whatever solutions we can design for our own country, for our own languages, in our own technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Simi Chaudharyji. There is a question, I think, directed to perhaps all of you from Vijay Kumar to everyone. Can crowdsourcing of data be a good solution to build affordable data sets? Maybe Khalid, you can take this question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, this is a very up-to-date approach to data curation. I think it's very important to be careful about the copyright and the intellectual property of the owners of the data that you are crowdsourcing. If the idea is to constitute a large network of experts that can help with data annotation, data labeling, this is an approach that is widely used. And I know that a number of partners are working with different universities and different institutions in India to do that. So yes, this is a very good approach to data production and data curation.
Thank you, Khalid. One question which is from Ranjit Bharati. What are the scope of translation into local languages like Bhojpuri, Braj, etc., from these languages to English, actually? So far, we are working on major language to major language translation, both Google and Microsoft. So is there a possibility of looking at, minor languages like Bhojpuri, Braj, etc., from there to English or vice versa? Maybe Dan, you can answer this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is an exciting area. I think this is where technologies like unsupervised machine translation can make a big difference. I mentioned it briefly, but where you don't need a parallel corpus. And the reason I think this is exciting is that there is a lot of literature in a lot of these local languages in India, right? Even beyond the 22 scheduled languages, there's often a very long historical literary tradition. I was reading about Dakani poetry the other day and Dakani literature, and there is literally a tradition that I think goes back hundreds of years, right? But there's not a lot of parallel data, and I think in cases like this, where you have similar languages without a lot of parallel data, something like unsupervised machine translation could be really helpful. I know there have been some efforts, and I want to say maybe at JNU, if I remember correctly, on actually building corpora of Bhojpuri and Braj Bhasa and so on, right? So I think those corpora would be a great starting point, coupled with some unsupervised machine translation. I'm not aware of a lot of research on it, like necessarily having been published yet, but I think it is something that in the next few years will become possible. Am I misremembering, or is there indeed a Bhojpuri corpus that you and your students created?
Here we have corpus created under the funding from TDIL, but that is to be given free to the research institutes, Indian research institutes. But now we are creating an ecosystem where this can be put up for sale. And as in government, there are some bottlenecks. We are trying to resolve those bottlenecks, and the data will be available. There's a huge corpora of 17 Indian languages, parallel, and also tagged at the level of part of speech and chunked, both available. And they're from 18 domains, actually. So it's a very diverse corpora that we have. One question, I think, is from Shagun Sinha to everyone. Any of you can answer it. In the era of open source data, we talk about open source data. How does a language technology researcher deal with the copyright issues in collecting data? Khalid, you perhaps partially answered that. So if the data is open source, I take data, then what about the copyright issues?
Yeah, well, this is a really critical, and we should pay careful attention to that. I mentioned in my talk very briefly the European project that we call European Language Resource Coordination, where by law, the European Union, but also the European countries, imposes to the public sector the obligation to make their resources available. This is not really about universities or research institutions. It's about the public administration. So you can imagine that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in India produces a lot of reports in English, Hindi, English, Marathi, and Kannada, and so on. It would be really important for the government of India to make sure that all these reports are either available free of charge and de facto, or on request. So any university that sends an email to someone at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in India should get all this multilingual report. Here in Europe, it also applies to the broadcasters. The broadcaster companies that are publicly funded are supposed to make their audio data available for research and development of commercial product. So this is one way to get rid of this copyright. Otherwise, and this is what we have been doing for the last 20, 30 years, is to negotiate with the right holders. This is really a painful process. You need to identify who are the right holders and negotiate a license with them. And very often this is doable because if we talk to the newspapers, for instance, they are not doing language technology themselves, they are doing news. And if we tell them tomorrow we will get you some technology from Google, Microsoft, Apple, and others about fake news identification or hate speech identification, etc., they are very happy to contribute. So the advice I give always is talk to the right holder and make sure that you explain the technology that you're working on or the research that you're conducting, and you will get what you want. In some countries, and this is also applicable in India, I checked very quickly, there is this legal doctrine that is called fair use or fair dealing, these two different legal concepts. I know that in India, to conduct research on some copyright data is allowed in very specific conditions. So if you talk to an expert in these legal matters in India, I'm sure they will tell you more about it. And in some cases, you don't have to ask for the permission because it's research, and research is allowed within the Indian regulations. But please check this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Khalid. There are a lot of other questions actually, but we are running short of time. So I would request the participants to please send your queries directly to our speakers. Well, some of the questions I see are related to whether you can offer internships, all those things, so you can certainly direct those questions to go to their websites. I would request the participants to do some homework, go to the website of Google and ELRA and see if there are opportunities. They normally advertise opportunities if they come around, for there are a lot of opportunities for language data creation, annotation, etc. for students of linguistics. So certainly there'll be some. So I'll like to now close because there's time.
May I make a statement, Jhasa?
Please, yeah.
This is just to reiterate, as a representative of the Government of India, to reiterate it to all the participants here today, that the vision of the Government of India is to bring to reality a Bahubhashiya next to every citizen of India, and in this way work towards one nation and create real unity in diversity. And I really call upon everyone to render all this support and cooperation and come on board as Team India in our endeavor towards this direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. We all support the Indian initiative by the Government of India, and it's a huge initiative by the Ministry of IT, and also the PSA is taking a special interest in creating technologies now. Thank you so much. So to sum up now, we have, I'm very thankful to all the speakers who took their time off with a great, certainly as a great initiative on their part that they are giving their time for such interactions. And I'm very happy that our Vice Chancellor, despite his very, very busy and hectic schedule, was able to participate, and he was able to mention several initiatives that JNU is taking, like Incubation Center. We have started Atal Incubation Center, and one of our own companies actually that I'm advising is one of the applicants. And then he talked about starting new institutions like School of Engineering, Management, and Sanskrit and Indic Studies, and an ecosystem that is slowly developing in JNU where these things can be done in with a broader participation. I thank Dan, who is obviously very, very busy because Google is working on so many languages. India is, of course, a very important area, but Google has so many languages to work on. And so Dan, thank you so much once again for coming to our webinar and talking about especially the initiatives that you have on Indian languages, machine translation, transliteration, Gboard, and the Dakshina data resource that you have created. Thank you so much once again. And Khalid, as always, you have been so kind and so nice. Whenever I ask you, you always respond with a lot of positivity. So thank you so much for coming to this webinar and participating in it with a lot of data that you presented on ELRA, the organization which is already well known and slowly coming to be more popular in India in the academic institutions of India. And you discussed about the ELRA catalog and the map, as is very important because every ELRA participant has to declare resources that they have, which is a very good thing to do. And I remembered at every ELRA conference, you present the ELRA map, the latest ELRA map and catalog. And also the Indian language resources done by you in partnership with primarily CDAC and other individuals in India. So certainly I would say there is a lot of initiative from you on the spoken languages data. And in India, it's a challenge to create spoken language technologies with a lot of, the multilinguality, code switching and code mixing, and also the non-standard usages that people are so fond of doing in India. And you also talked about the language technology for all event, which in Paris, I missed it because of my last minute engagements, and I had made all the plans, which was done under the IYIL UNESCO initiative. And you ended with a very famous quote, best data is more data. So I think we should look at that more closely in India. We should create more and more data and resources for languages which are less resourced, truly less resourced. My special thanks to Ms. Simi Chaudhary ji, the new director, head of the TDI program, for sparing time for our webinar. She missed our webinar in the Vilre event that we did under ELRA. She was supposed to speak there too. And because of her engagements that time, so this time she honored my invitation. Thank you so much, ma'am. And you were able to participate with a very elaborate, information on government policies and plans. And this government is actually very, very committed towards offering content to Indians in Indian languages. Remember the e-governance plan earlier now has become the Digital India plan, which is much more elaborate, much more practical, and it's going to be feasible because we are doing a lot of pilot projects to also test ourselves. And I'm currently in some committees reviewing some of these pilot projects. And also you talked about the offering internet content in Indian language, which is not an easy task because most of the content on internet actually is in English. 53% of content on internet is in English, and not more than 1% Indian languages even today. But the good thing is that most of the new users who come to internet are demanding and using actually Indian languages. So 9 out of 10 new users are demanding Indian languages. So that's a good sign, and I'm sure government will be pressured to offer more such initiatives where people can actually use content for education, for health, for e-governance. All that is critical actually. And I would also like to point out another area is that the heritage computing. Heritage in India is unparalleled compared to any other country. Sanskrit is a very important language. So we have 6,000 years of continuous history. A lot of manuscripts are there. So there must be some initiative also to make sure our heritage doesn't get lost, doesn't perish. And you talked about evolving a distributed model, which is welcome because I think our distributed model, bottom-up model is much more practical and feasible. And in that case, you talked about creating an ecosystem with startup companies and the academia in the universities. So thank you so much for bringing up so many insights from the government side. And I hope this will lead to a new ecosystem with the model that we have already with ELRA and LDC and our giants, Google and Microsoft, and emerging giants like Samsung, Amazon. All these will give us new insights in creating an ecosystem which is going to work for India, because India is known to be a place where things don't work. These standards don't work, technologies don't work. You have to test your technology to make it work in India. It's really, really tough. So I would really hope that all these lead to a viable and practical model in India where we all work together under one umbrella, and of course in a distributed fashion, and help build technologies for Indian languages. So thank you so much once again. And finally, I thank all the lovely participants. They registered in large numbers, approximately 900. And I saw 315 to 16 actually holding ground. Even now we have 295 holding ground. I don't imagine we could have done this in a physical seminar that normally we do in JNU. we have 100 or the most 200 participants in a big auditorium, but our online participation is so large that we really have to thank Corona for giving us this opportunity. Though I sincerely hope that this phase lasts sooner, and we are again alive again. So thank you so much, everyone who made this happen. I also have to thank JNU webinar, Dr. Saurav Sharma, who happily lent his support for Zoom. And Zoom is a very easy platform to actually do seminars on. And I also thank my research student, Devendra Kumar, for managing the waiting room and all. So thank you so much, everybody, once again, and I'll say goodbye to everybody. Thank you so much once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for the organization. Excellent workshop. Hope to see you all face-to-face soon, and have some serious work with the TDIL and the agencies. We enjoyed that in the past, and I hope that we will continue to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khalid.
Surely, Khalid. Thank you, and thank you, Dan, and thank you, Professor Jha.
Thank you, everyone.
Namaste.
Thank you, Dan. It's late for you, very late for you. Go have some sleep.
Yeah, thanks. See you.
Thank you. Bye.